The new EVO Quick Nippers are designed especially to make barefoot trimming faster and easier. This design helps you form the arc of the all-important Mustang Roll more effectively, while also reducing the amount of rasping to be done after nipping. The Quick Nippers have a powerful integrated spring system that allows you to use them effectively in one hand. A locking screw, positioned opposite from the spring, keeps the nippers in a closed position for easy storage. A quick turn of the screw opens or closes the nipper handles. The Quick Nipper spring opens the handles farther than any other nipper spring, allowing you to more easily position and maneuver the nippers when trimming. The nipper handles have a unique curved flare that gives you a more comfortable grip and greater leverage. This gives you 3 distinct grips when using one hand to operate the nippers. You can start your cuts with a choke grip on the narrow part of the handles close to the nipper head, with the blades wide apart. Then, as you close the handles, slide your hands out to the flared ends for a more powerful grip. The spring system is designed to maintain constant pressure against your hands. This can take some getting used to. There are 2 springs for the Quick Nippers. One is made of thicker spring steel than the other. This is the firm action spring. It creates more powerful tension of the nipper handles against your fingers and hand. This makes it recoil faster when you are nipping thicker or harder hoof wall. However, it can be difficult to control if you have small hands or have not used spring-powered nippers before. The thinner wire version is the soft action spring. This spring is easier to squeeze and control. The Quick Nippers usually come with a soft spring installed. After you learn to use the spring action for trimming, you can change the springs and try the firm action version. To change the springs, open the nipper handles and unscrew the spring mounting bolt. Remove the spring, but be careful to keep track of the 2 washers. To mount a spring, you might have to pinch it together with your fingers. When you reinstall the mounting bolt, be sure the spring ring is fitted tightly over the nipper rivet. The rubber-backed washer fits against the rivet with the flat washer on top. Double check to make sure the spring ring is flat against the nippers. Then, tighten the bolt firmly, but be careful not to damage it. After extensive use, check occasionally to make sure the spring mounting bolt remains tight. Eventually, all springs weaken and need to be replaced. When using the Quick Nippers with 2 hands, try positioning one hand above the other as you rotate the nipper head to advance the blades half their width for each cut. This reduces the effort needed for each nip. When using a one-hand grip, you can start each cut with your hand close to the nipper head. Then slide your hand outward toward the flared ends of the handles for more leverage when you finish the cut. Meanwhile, use your other hand to hold the hoof and guide the nipper head around the wall. Using your free hand to guide the nipper helps you make very precise cuts. You can easily shift from 1 to 2 hand grips as needed. Just start a cut, then add a second hand to the handles to complete it. In some positions, it is helpful to rotate your grip to finish a cut near the heels. Central to an effective barefoot trim is the arc of the Mustang Roll. The arc must extend well up the front of the wall at the toe. If the arc is not wide or high enough, the toe wall will soon become sharp-edged. And it needs to extend all the way back to the heels to prevent flaring and cracking. But it must be the widest at the toe region. The quick nippers allow you to create the basic shape of the roll by easily making successive bevel cuts around the outer wall. Each bevel cut extends the arc farther up the outer surface of the roll. Using the nippers in this way also reduces the amount of rasping you must do after nipping. However, a second central concern of barefoot trimming is preserving sole horn for protection of the sensitive tissues underneath it. This wild horse hoof shows how a well-developed sole can be part of the roll and actively bear weight. Flat nipper cuts followed by rasping removes sole horn, reducing the protective function of the sole across the toe region. That can make many domestic horses tender-footed. Angling your nippers when trimming the wall helps you make an effective Mustang roll and preserve as much sole horn as possible. By making your first cut at an angle of around 45 degrees, you begin the arc while avoiding the sole. A second bevel cut at a steeper angle around the upper edge of the first cut shapes the middle of the arc. A third cut extends the arc well up the wall, especially around the toe region. These cuts leave the sole horn in place while also building a broad arc for the roll. Here you see the amount of wall and sole removed by a flat nipper cut, the red line, versus a bevel cut, the green line. Using the bevel cut can leave sole horn protruding above the arc of the wall. That may look odd, but it provides extra protection for thin or sensitive soles. On hooves with little excess wall growth to remove, or flat, thin soles, it can be best to make only two bevel cuts. The first one in the outer half of the wall's width at about 75 to 90 degrees. This leaves half the width of the wall even with the sole as extra protection. Then you can make a second bevel cut along the upper edge of the first one, extending the arc up the outer wall. When trimming hooves with longer or thicker wall growth, 3 bevel cuts are required to make a wide roll arc. To actually shorten the length of the hoof wall, make the first bevel cut along the outer edge of the white line. If the hoof horn is hard, you can make your first cut with 2 hands, rotating the handles to advance the nipper blades 1/2 their width for each cut. But often you can make the first cut with 1 hand by beginning each cut with a grip closer to the nipper head, then sliding your hand out to the flared ends of the handles to finish it. Then proceed with a second cut along the upper border of the first. Use your free hand to guide the nipper blades. Finally, make a third cut to extend the top edge of the arc well up the wall. The width of this cut depends on the thickness of the hoof wall. Here you can see that no sole horn has been removed, but the outer layers of the hoof wall have been shortened considerably. After completing the bevel cuts, you can smooth the outer wall with a flat rasp to blend it into the roll, and then smooth the arc of the roll itself with a radius rasp. Here you see the same hoof before trimming, and here after, measuring 1/4 inch shorter in length, with a 1/2 inch high roll at the toe, but no sole horn removed. The toe wall has been reduced by removing horn on the front, not the bottom or bearing surface of the hoof. Thus the sole is preserved. You can also make these bevel cuts from above, with the hoof on a hoof stand. This approach allows you a better view of the outer wall. It is useful when working on horses with stiff legs or very long toes, when you need to do more extreme toe reduction by making a very high roll arc across the toe region. Most of the time, you will need to do some wall rasping to blend the upper border of the arc with the wall above it, especially if the wall is flared or distorted. But usually, most of this can be done with a radius rasp. You can even use the quick nippers to make a fast maintenance trim without even putting the hoof between your legs. All you need for this is the quick nippers and a radius rasp. Holding the hoof with one hand and the quick nippers with the other, you can make a bevel cut around the hoof wall to restore the shape of the roll arc. For roll maintenance, this cut can focus on the toe and be relatively thin. Following that, make a second cut along the upper edge of the first cut, further forming a broad curve to the roll. Again, this greatly reduces the amount of rasping required to finish the roll. Follow these nipper cuts with the radius rasp to blend and smooth the arc and complete the fastest maintenance trim possible. This quick trim can also be done on hind hooves by bracing the fetlock against one of your thighs to steady the hoof. So the main concern in making these bevel cuts is where to begin the first cut. For shorter hooves and thinner soles, begin in the middle of the wall thickness with a near 90-degree cut. For longer hooves and thicker soles, begin near the white line on the inner border of the wall with a 45-degree cut. If you feel confident about judging the condition of the bars, you can use the quick nippers to trim hard, overgrown layers of bar horn. But be careful to trim only horn that it clearly extends above the level of the sole horn. Again, only if you feel confident about judging excess horn growth. You can use the quick nippers to remove hard, overgrown layers of frog horn. This initial frog trim makes it much easier to apply your hoof knife to clean the grooves of the frog commissures. But do not use nippers on the frog unless you feel confident about what to trim and what not to trim. The quick nippers will serve you best if you keep them sharp. Frequent touch-ups of the blade edges will not only make the nippers more accurate and easier to use, it will also make them last longer. To prolong the life of your nippers, sharpen the blade bevels by removing steel along the upper side of the bevel, by pressing harder there and more lightly on the cutting edges. You must be careful to hold the sharpener steady and flat on the bevel. Move it evenly across the bevel in a diagonal motion. Hold the nippers very steady when you do this by bracing against a solid surface. Try to feel the angle of the bevel and match that with the surface of the sharpener. After you have smoothed the bevel, gently pass the sharpener over the top edge of the blade to remove any burrs and test the sharpness with your finger. You will get the best results if you put the nippers in a vise with a support under the nipper head to keep it from moving. Be sure to match the angle of the blade bevel with that of your sharpener. Evolutionary hoof care tools are designed to help you help horses have the healthiest hooves possible. Be sure to see all of them by visiting us online.